My name is Naomi Grace Calloway. I am 31 years old. I work in the cardiology wing at Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville, Tennessee. And on most mornings, I walk into that building before 6 o'clock in a clean white coat with my name embroidered on the left breast pocket in dark blue thread. And I think about the woman who made me, not my mother. I'll get to her. I mean the woman I was at 22, on a May morning in Knoxville, in a black cap and gown with a diploma folder clutched in both hands. I think about her because she deserves to be thought about, because for a long time, very few people did. I made it 147 steps into Thompson Bowling Arena before my legs stopped working. I know it was 147 because I had practiced the processional route the day before and counted every step from the East Concourse entrance to my assigned seat in the graduate section, the way I counted everything back then, methodically, privately, accounting for every inch of ground I had to cover on my own. I had been doing it so long it had stopped feeling like compensation and started feeling like personality. I counted. I planned. I worked. I did not ask for help, because asking had never produced results. And so asking had stopped feeling like an option years before it should have. The arena was full. 8,000 people, maybe more. The lights were the specific fluorescent white of large institutional spaces, flat and merciless and indifferent. I remember the music, pomp and circumstance, filling that enormous room the way it fills every enormous room in America on May mornings, loaded with meaning that feels borrowed rather than earned, until it is yours, and then it is the most overwhelming thing you have ever heard. I remember the smell of someone's corsage 2 rows ahead of me. I remember thinking very clearly that my parents were not in that building. And then I remember nothing at all. I woke up at UT Medical Center on Jefferson Avenue at 12:03 in the afternoon, 3 hours after my graduating class received their diplomas. My cap was gone. My gown was draped over the chair in the corner. I was in a hospital gown with an IV in my left arm and a blood pressure cuff that inflated on a timer and made me flinch each time it tightened. A bag of dark iron-rich fluid hung from a pole beside me. The room smelled like every hospital room, antiseptic and recycled air, and something underlying it all that I now recognize as the specific smell of people doing their best. My grandfather was asleep in the chair beside me, Walter James Calloway, my pop, 76 years old that spring, still in his good khakis and his white button-down shirt, his silver Sunday tie loosened at the neck, his silver-white head tipped slightly forward the way a man's head tips when he has been awake too long and finally, briefly, let himself rest. His right hand was resting on the side rail of my hospital bed, just resting there, just in case I woke up and needed something to hold. My parents were at a country club in Charlotte, North Carolina, 237 miles away, watching my sister announce her engagement over shrimp cocktail and champagne. Before I tell you the rest of this, please like and subscribe, but only if this story is landing somewhere real for you, and drop your location and local time in the comments. I genuinely want to know where in this country you're sitting right now, listening to me. Knowing you're there matters. I grew up in Germantown, Tennessee, which is a suburb of Memphis that considers itself slightly too distinguished to describe itself as a suburb of Memphis. The houses are large and well-maintained. The school system is the primary reason families move there and stay there for decades. The yards are the kind of manicured that signals, politely but firmly, that appearances matter here. They always mattered in our house. My father, Gerald Allen Calloway, he was 54 when I graduated college. He sold commercial real estate in the Memphis metro area, had done so since the late 80s, and had been sufficiently successful at it that the word money was never spoken directly in our household. only implied by what surrounded us. The Escalade in the driveway, the kitchen renovation in 2004, the annual family vacation to Hilton Head that was discussed in terms of logistics rather than cost, because cost was simply not a concern that applied. My mother, Diane Calloway, née Harper, was 52. She did not work, which she experienced not as absence, but as occupation. The management of the home, the PTA, the neighborhood watch, the social calendar that kept the Calloway family correctly positioned within the Germantown ecosystem. She drove a white Cadillac that she washed herself every Saturday morning, which I always thought was interesting. That she would choose, of all available tasks, that one. The intimate physical labor of maintaining the exterior of something beautiful. They had 2 daughters. Rebecca Lynn Calloway was born August 4th, 1991. I arrived December 18th, 1993, which made me the younger one, the smaller one, and almost always the one who got looked past in the family photographs. Not intentionally, I think, but in the unreflective way that happens when one child fills a frame more naturally than another. Becca had our mother's dark hair and green eyes and a specific quality of presence, that rare calibration of beauty and social ease that communities organize themselves around without quite realizing they're doing it. She started pageants at 7. She won often enough that my parents kept a dedicated shelf in the living room for her trophies and a section of the refrigerator door for her ribbons and press clippings. I had a section too. Lower left door. There was a class photo from 4th grade, a certificate for completing the Presidential Fitness Challenge, and a Memphis Zoo magnet that no one could explain the origin of. It was there for years. I used to look at it sometimes while I was getting out the orange juice and think, I do not know why you are here, little magnet. But I understand you completely. I want to be careful about how I tell the Becca portion of this, because she is not the villain of my story, even if she was sometimes the instrument of my diminishment. She was raised to be the center of things. She was rewarded for it consistently, by our parents and by the broader world that received her warmly. A person doesn't become the golden child by plotting. They just receive what's offered, over and over, until receiving becomes indistinguishable from deserving. That's not cruelty. That's just the particular damage of being chosen. My damage was different. I was bookish. I was quiet. I wanted to be a doctor from the time I was 9 years old, and my grandfather had a minor cardiac event, and I sat in the waiting room of Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis and decided, with the unsophisticated clarity that children are capable of, that I was going to understand how hearts worked. I read science books. I took AP Biology as a sophomore, AP Chemistry as a junior, AP Physics and AP Calculus the same year as a senior. I tutored other students for gas money. My report cards came home straight A's for 4 years and were noted by my parents in the way one notes stable weather, with mild satisfaction and no particular ceremony. Becca's B- average at Germantown High was the subject of considerable parental attention, creative problem solving, and at one point a family meeting about the necessity of bringing in a private tutor, which cost $65 an hour twice a week for the better part of junior year. Nobody offered me a tutor. I didn't need one. I was capable. I was self-sufficient. I was, as my mother would eventually say to me in a kitchen 9 years later, not like Becca, not in the sense of needing. I got into the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, pre-medical track, and with a partial academic scholarship that covered $18,000 of a $32,000 annual tuition. I drove myself to the financial aid office, downloaded the FAFSA form, learned what a subsidized loan was, and applied for work-study before I had even told my parents which school I was attending. Not because I'd given up on asking for help. I want to be precise about that. But because a part of me had already assembled the evidence and run the projection and knew, the way I came to know most things, through careful attention rather than instinct, how the conversation was going to go. I was right. My parents sat across from me in the living room in June of 2012. Dad had the Sunday afternoon posture he always defaulted to on his days off. Jacket off, shirt untucked, half watching the Braves game on the muted television behind me. Mom sat on the edge of the couch cushion, which was what she did when she was bracing for something she'd already rehearsed. I laid out the numbers. Scholarship covered a little over half. I needed approximately $14,000 a year for room, board, and the gap in tuition. I had work-study arranged. I needed a supplemental contribution from them. Dad nodded slowly, the way he nodded when he was calculating how to say something that wouldn't close any doors. "We'll figure something out," he said. Not, "We've got you covered." Not, "Don't worry about it." Just the soft, plausible vagueness of a man who had already decided something he didn't want to say out loud yet. What they figured out was federal student loans for the full unmet balance, work-study hours in the campus library, and what my mother called learning resourcefulness, which is a phrase I have since filed under. Things people say to children they are not going to help. They gave me $1,500 for first semester books and supplies. Once, they were genuinely proud of themselves for that. Becca, who had graduated Ole Miss the previous spring with a communications degree, was 21 years old and living in a one-bedroom apartment in Midtown Memphis that my parents paid $1,100 a month for. She drove the 2012 Lexus IS they'd bought her for her high school graduation. She was doing part-time social media consulting for a real estate agency downtown and, that summer, was focused primarily on deciding whether to get a nose job before fall. She called me the week I started school to ask my opinion about it. I was 15 minutes away from a dinner shift at the Perkins on Cumberland Avenue. I told her I didn't have time to weigh in on cosmetic procedures. She told me I was too intense. I put my phone in my apron pocket and went to work. It was Christmas break of my sophomore year, December 2013. When I found the statements. I want to be clear. I was not snooping. I was looking for a pen. The kitchen junk drawer was empty, and I needed something to write with. And I remembered that Dad kept pens in a cup on his desk in the study, and I walked in at 9:47 in the morning and the file cabinet beside the desk was standing open, not dramatically, just ajar, the way a file cabinet is left when someone has been in a hurry, and there was a folder on top of the open drawer. Manila. My father's handwriting on the tab. Education Trust. Children. I picked it up. I sat down. I read it. My grandfather, Pop, my father's father, had set up individual education savings accounts for both Becca and me at each of our births. He'd contributed steadily over the years from his rental income and savings, adding amounts at birthdays and Christmases with the quiet consistency of a man who had decided that his grandchildren were going to have options regardless of what the world thought of that plan. By the time Becca started Ole Miss in September 2009, her account held $51,200. By August 2012, when I enrolled at UT, mine held $45,000. There were disbursement records in the folder. Becca's account had been drawn down to cover her tuition in full, which was fair, which was exactly what it was designed for, and then drawn down additionally, $4,200 in March of 2010, labeled Spring Trip, $8,800 in October of 2011 for medical/cosmetic procedure, $12,600 across multiple 2010 through 2012 transfers for Greek organization fees, $5,800 in January 2013 for credit card balance. Her account was now at $2,100. That math made sense if you accepted the premise that her extras were educational expenses, which I did not, but that was not the part that leveled me. My account had been drawn down too. By December 2013, it held $6,400. The missing $38,600 had not gone to my tuition. There were no disbursement records showing transfers to UT Knoxville's bursar office. Every withdrawal from my account had been routed to the household checking account, the one my parents used for the mortgage and the utilities and the Escalade payment. 17 transfers of varying amounts, all labeled identically, transfer. Beginning August 17th, 2012, 8 days after I moved into my residence hall, and continuing through that November. I sat in that chair for 45 minutes. I did the math 4 times. Each time, I got the same answer. I put the folder back. I walked to the kitchen. I made coffee. My mother came downstairs in her robe at 10:15 and poured herself a cup from the pot I'd just made and said, "Morning, sweetheart," and kissed me on the top of my head the way she had done since I was small, and I stood there with my own cup and thought, "You took my grandfather's money and gave it to your other daughter for Greek dues and a nose job, and you watched me take out $14,000 in loans and you said you were proud of how resourceful I was." I waited until Becca was out, and my father was at his office. Then I sat down across from my mother at the kitchen table and I put the folder between us and I said quietly, "I found this by accident. I want to understand what I'm looking at." She looked at the folder for a long time. Then she looked at me. "The accounts were set up for both of you," I said. "Mine had $45,000 when I started school. That money wasn't used for my tuition or my books or my housing. I'd like to understand where it went." She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. "Naomi," she said, "you got a scholarship. You didn't need all of it." "That's not the same as answering my question, Mom." Becca was going through a difficult time. She said it with the tone of a final word rather than a reason. "She needed more support than you did. You've always been so independent. You've always been so capable." She looked at me in a way that I believe she intended as a compliment. "You never needed us the way Becca needs us." I was quiet for a moment. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a neighbor was mowing. The world was so indifferently ordinary in that moment that it almost made it worse. "I needed $14,000 a year," I said. "I have loans. I work 3 jobs. I eat cereal for dinner 4 nights a week because I can't afford full groceries and MCAT prep materials at the same time. That wasn't independence, Mom. That was just surviving what I was left with." She stood up and started rinsing her mug in the sink with her back to me. "We provided for you," she said. "You're going to be a doctor. We're very proud of you." "Are you going to put the money back?" She didn't answer. She kept rinsing a mug that was already clean. I drove back to Knoxville 2 days early. I didn't confront my father. I already understood the shape of that conversation. The redirect. The implication that noticing the problem made me the problem. The eventual dissolution into some variation of, "You need to be more of a team player, Naomi." I was not equipped for that conversation and survive the spring semester simultaneously, so I opened a separate checking account at a different bank. I raised my tutoring rate from $25 to $30 an hour after a professor referral. I picked up a Friday shift at the Perkins. In addition to the Thursday through Sunday I was already working, I kept moving the way I had always kept moving, in the direction of the next thing, because the next thing was all I could control. My MCAT score came back April of 2015, 519, 96th percentile. I did not call my parents. I called Pop. He picked up on the second ring, the way he always did. "Nay," he said. That name, that shorthand that had never fully resolved into a nickname so much as a sound that meant, "You are known, you are mine, I am paying attention." "I got my MCAT scores," I told him. "And?" 519. A beat of silence, then the warmest laugh I have ever heard a human being produce, low and full, the laugh of a man whose whole body is in it. 519, he said. "Lord have mercy, nay. I knew it. I knew it. I could hear his back porch in the background, the cicadas of a Memphis summer, the neighbor's window unit, the faint television through the screen door. You call your mama? Not yet, I said. A pause. And the kind that held more understanding than a sentence could carry. Call me when you get that acceptance letter, he said. I want to be the first one you tell. He was. The Vanderbilt School of Medicine acceptance arrived October 14th, 2015. I was in a library carrel with a vertebrate anatomy textbook in front of me and my phone face up on the table. The email subject said, Update regarding your application, Vanderbilt University School of Medicine. I read the first line. Then I called Pop. He cried. Quietly, in the way of men of his generation who had decided some things were worth showing and had also decided not to make a performance of it. Just the thickened quality in his voice when he said, I am so proud of you, I don't know what to do with myself. But my father had promised to submit a character reference. I had asked him in September. He'd said yes without hesitation. The easy yes of someone who has not yet thought through the follow-through. I emailed him the submission portal instructions. I followed up twice. I got, I'll handle it this week. And then, don't nag me, Naomi. I said I'm handling it. He did not handle it. 10 days before my application deadline, Vanderbilt's admissions office emailed me. One required reference letter had not been received, and my application could not be reviewed until the file was complete. I drove to a gas station because I didn't trust myself to hold it together inside my apartment. I sat in a parking space under a shell sign, and I called my father and he didn't pick up. And I left a voicemail that said things I had been holding for 3 years, and that came out less as sentences than as the pressure escaping a sealed thing that had been stored too long. He called back 2 hours later. He'd been swamped. He thought the deadline was later. He told me to calm down because panicking never helped anything. I called Dr. Patricia Okoro that same night. She was my biochemistry professor. Small, brilliant, the kind of teacher who handed back exams in silence and let the scores speak. I had earned an A in both semesters of her course and had been functioning as her informal teaching assistant for over a year. I explained the situation. I apologized for the late request. I told her I completely understood if it wasn't possible. She said, I will have it to them by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, Naomi. Do not panic. It was in their system at 8:47 a.m. I got in. I started in August 2017. I never told my father that his letter had been replaced by a woman who'd stayed late at her office on a weeknight because she believed in me more than he did. I let him say he was proud at Christmas dinner that year, and I passed the sweet potatoes, and I watched Becca show everyone photos from the Cabo trip she'd just taken, and I counted the months until August. Senior year was the hardest year of my life, and I say that having since survived gross anatomy, a 92-hour trauma rotation, a dissertation committee that sent me back for revisions twice, and a breakup with a surgical resident who was on call so often that we communicated primarily through refrigerator notes. 18 credit hours per semester. Get 32 hours a week across 3 jobs. The Perkins, tutoring, and work study in the biology department office. A research grant that required 20 hours of lab time monthly. A senior thesis on lipid metabolism markers in early-stage cardiovascular disease, which is a topic I now understand in a way my 21-year-old self could not have fully anticipated. I slept an average of 5 hours a night and told myself it was temporary. I lost 18 pounds between August 2016 and April 2017. Not intentionally. I was eating, just not enough, and not well. I noticed it in my clothes first, then in the bathroom mirror, a hollowness around my eyes I attributed to exhaustion and didn't investigate, because investigating required time I didn't have, And a doctor's appointment I kept deferring because I was going to be a doctor and I would know if something were actually wrong. I was wrong about that. The person who got me through that year was my roommate, Jade Park. 22, pre-doctoral biology, from a family in Nashville where both parents were professors. Thoughtful, warm, present in all the ways that my own family wasn't. Though Jade never said that directly, and I never asked her to. She had the specific empathy that comes from watching someone grind and deciding to witness it honestly. A sandwich left in the fridge with my name on it on nights she knew I had a late shift. A text at 11 p.m. that said simply, "Eat something." Sunday evenings where she'd make a full pot of pasta and sit us both down for 45 minutes and talk about anything that wasn't work or grades or the future. Just the immediate texture of being alive in a specific place at a specific time. I told her about the college fund in March of senior year, sitting on the couch at 11 o'clock, the television low in the background. I told her about the Christmas discovery, the disbursement records, the conversation at the kitchen table with my mother's back turned. She listened without interrupting, which is a rarer thing than it should be. "Are you going to do anything about it?" she asked. "I can't afford the bandwidth right now," I said. "I'm just trying to get to May." She nodded. "After May, then." There was also Pop. Every Sunday at 7 in the evening, without exception. On the Sundays I was still on shift at the Perkins, he'd leave a voicemail. 3 or 4 minutes, just him talking. The weather in Memphis, the Cardinals, a documentary he'd watched that he thought I'd find interesting. He talked like I was right there with him. He talked like time was an ordinary, abundant thing that he had plenty of, and all of it was for me. I never told him about the college fund. Not then. I was protecting the peace of those Sunday calls, or the version of my father that Pop still believed in, or maybe just myself. From the act of saying it out loud to someone who would hear it with the full weight it deserved. The graduation ceremony was May 13th, 2017, at Thompson Bowling Arena. I had my cap and gown. I had my diploma folder. I had 2 family tickets that my parents had confirmed in February. On the evening of May 11th, my father called to ask what time to arrive. On the morning of May 13th, at 7:42 a.m., he texted instead. "Naomi baby." Something came up with Becca's engagement we couldn't have predicted. Derek proposed last month, and the party his family planned in Charlotte got moved to today. We can't miss this for the Haynes family. We are so incredibly proud of you and will celebrate when you come home. Call us after the ceremony. Love, Dad. I read it 3 times. Then I put the phone face down on the dresser and stood in front of my mirror in my cap and gown, and I thought about every year of being the capable one, the resourceful one, the one who didn't need them. I thought about the college fund and the kitchen table and the turned back and the clean mug. I thought about this specific morning, the most significant academic morning of my life so far, and how I was standing alone in a dorm room in Knoxville while my family gathered at a country club in Charlotte to celebrate my sister's diamond ring. Jade knocked on my door at 7:58. "I'm going," I told her before she could say anything. "Okay," she said. "Then we're going." We went. The arena held close to 8,000 people for a commencement, and the air inside was the specific temperature of a space that has been overcooled in anticipation, and then warmed unevenly by the bodies filling it. The East Concourse tunnel smelled like the morning outside, cut grass and May heat, and then, like the inside of the arena, that clean institutional cold. The graduates entered in column formation, gowns brushing the polished concrete, and the music started the way it always starts. That stately, loaded melody that doesn't mean anything until it means everything. I had eaten half a granola bar for breakfast because I hadn't been hungry. I had slept 4 hours. I had been on my feet for 6 hours at the Perkins the night before. Somewhere between step 40 and step 60, the arena tilted. Not sharply. Gradually, the gray periphery of my vision narrowing inward the way it does when you stand too fast. I remember thinking, water. I need water. I remember thinking, not here. Not in front of all these people. Not today. I remember the back of the gown of the person ahead of me, Devin, from two of my labs, heading to Johns Hopkins for his PhD, and his name forming in my mouth the way names form when you need something to anchor to. I don't remember the floor. I was told later, by the paramedic, by Dr. Simone Tran at the ER, by Jade, who watched it happen from the family section, that a faculty marshal caught me partially on the way down, which is why I landed on my side. That the ceremony paused for 11 minutes, that Jade climbed over 4 people to reach the aisle, that she sent her own family inside to watch the ceremony for both of us, and came with me instead. At UT Medical Center, Dr. Tran ordered blood work. My hemoglobin came back at 7.1, severely anemic. Ferritin at 4 nanograms per milliliter, effectively depleted. Vitamin D at 11, critically deficient. Resting heart rate had been 118 on arrival. They started IV fluids and an iron infusion immediately, and Dr. Tran sat on the side of the bed and looked at me with the specific look I now know how to give patients myself. The one that means, I need you to understand this is serious without causing a panic. When did you last have a full meal? She asked. Something real. Protein. Volume. I had to think about it. I genuinely had to search for it. Tuesday, I said. A chicken sandwich. But that was 3 days ago. She wrote something on her chart. Then she looked up. You're going to medical school in the fall. Vanderbilt, I said. August. She was quiet for a moment. Take care of yourself the way you're going to take care of your patients. I have thought about that sentence at least once a week for the 9 years since she said it. If the hospital called my emergency contact at 10:53 a.m. My primary emergency contact had been Walter James Calloway since I enrolled at UT in August of 2012. His cell phone, his address on Cordova Road in Germantown. The nursing staff told me afterward that he answered on the first ring. He was already in Knoxville. He had driven up the day before, alone, which his orthopedic doctor had specifically told him not to do on long drives because of a knee that had been requiring more accommodation than either of them had quite agreed on, and had checked into the Holiday Inn Express on Kingston Pike at 7:30 the previous evening. He'd had dinner at the Cracker Barrel down the road. He'd called me at 7 o'clock the way he always did, but I was finishing a shift and hadn't picked up, and he'd left a voicemail. Just checking in. I'm in town. I'll be in section 214 tomorrow morning. Left side, 3rd row from the aisle. Your old pop's going to be there. Sleep well, Nene. When the hospital called, he was 20 minutes away. My parents were also called. Both cell phones, then the landline. My mother called back at 1:34 p.m., nearly 3 hours after I went down. Oh, Naomi, are you okay? We're in Charlotte. We're 3 hours away. Her voice had the specific quality of a person who is genuinely distressed and simultaneously making rapid calculations about what she was being asked to give up. I could hear the party in the background, music from a speaker, the bright, floating laughter of a catered event. I'm okay, I said. You don't have to come. Are you sure? We can... I'm sure, Mom. She said she loved me 3 times before she hung up. My father texted at 2:15. Heard you had an episode. Dad's with you. Call us when you're discharged. Love you, kiddo. An episode. As if I'd had a mood. Pop walked into my room at 12:17. Good khakis, white button down, Sunday tie loosened at the neck. He stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at me in the bed, and his face did the thing that old men's faces do when they have decided that falling apart will not help and that the decision costs them something. Then he crossed to the chair and sat down and put his hand on the side rail. Hey, Pop, I said. My voice was embarrassingly small. "Hey, Nene," he said. He didn't say anything else for a while. He just sat with me, in the quiet of that room. Years while the afternoon light moved across the window and the blood pressure cuff inflated and deflated, and the iron infusion dripped steadily through the line in my left arm. When Dr. Tran came back with my updated panel, Pop was the one who asked the follow-up questions. He asked them carefully, in the measured way of a man who wanted all the information before he decided what to do with it. What did the numbers mean? What was the treatment plan? What did she need going forward? He listened to every answer and nodded slowly and thanked her. And after she left, he went to the hospital cafeteria and came back with a turkey sandwich, a cup of soup, an orange, and a small container of apple juice. And he set them on my tray table without comment or ceremony. I ate all of it. He watched me eat with the expression of someone conducting a measurement. Not judging, just taking stock of something that mattered very much. When I finished and he'd gathered the wrappers and folded them neat and dropped them in the bin the way he did with everything, making order out of whatever was available, he folded his hands in his lap and looked at the window where the Knoxville afternoon was doing its slow orange thing, and he said, "How long has it been like this, Nene?" I knew what he meant. He didn't mean the anemia specifically. He meant the whole shape of it. The 3 jobs and the loans and the meals that didn't happen and the graduation morning spent alone. 4 years, I said. He nodded once, slowly, and didn't say anything else. But something had settled in him. Some decision that I didn't know the shape of yet. And I could feel the weight of it the way you feel a door close in a neighboring room. Not with a bang, just the pressure change, the shift in the air. 3 days after my graduation, Pop drove to Charlotte. He didn't tell me he was going. He said goodnight from his hotel room in Knoxville. He'd stayed in town until I was discharged and had groceries and was fed. And the next morning at 6 o'clock, he got in his car and drove 3.5 hours east into North Carolina. He had printed everything. I didn't know until later that he had been the one who set up the trust accounts. Both of them, Becca's and mine. And that because the accounts had been established in his name with my parents listed as authorized managers. The bank had sent him annual summaries every year. He had filed them. He had noticed, starting in 2013, that the disbursements from my account didn't match anything educational. He had told himself there was an explanation he didn't fully understand. He had waited for my father to offer one voluntarily. He had been patient. The particular patience of a man who loves his son and wants to believe the best of him, and will wait a reasonable amount of time for the best to reveal itself. He was done waiting. He sat down at the kitchen table across from my parents and he laid the bank statements out. His copies, the originals, dated and annotated. And he said, "I want you to explain this to me. And I want you to take your time and tell me the truth. Newer because I am 76 years old, and I have been patient my whole life, and I am done being patient about Naomi." My father explained, the way people explain when the documents are on the table, and there is no longer the option of denial. Partially, defensively, in the language of justification. Cash flow problems in the business a few years back. Becca's needs had been greater. Naomi had her scholarship, her work ethic, her self-sufficiency. The money hadn't been stolen, Gerald said. It had been redirected within the family. Families did that. It wasn't anything sinister. Pop listened to all of it. And then he said, "Your daughter passed out at her college graduation because she hasn't been eating properly, because she has been working 3 jobs to fund an education that your granddaughter's money should have covered. And her hemoglobin is at 7.1. Do you know what that means?" My mother started crying. Pop waited until the crying had run its course and the kitchen was quiet. Then he said, "I'm changing my will." He did it that Friday, an estate attorney in Memphis, referred by his accountant, an office off Poplar Avenue not far from the commercial property that had been generating $3,200 a month in rental income for 31 years. His house in Germantown. Paid off? Valued at $680,000. His savings accounts, totaling $290,000. That commercial property. That steady, reliable income. He left Gerald and Diane the statutory minimum that Tennessee law required of a parent to an adult child. Everything else went into a trust. Sole beneficiary, Naomi Grace Calloway, dispersed in thirds over time, administered by his accountant, and with a letter of explanation attached that Pop wrote himself in plain, unambiguous English because he was not a man who left things open to interpretation. My parents called me the Sunday after. My father's voice was the voice of a man who had decided his primary emotion was betrayal. "What did you tell him?" he said. Not a question. "I didn't say anything to him," I said. "I didn't know he was going." "That's not possible, Naomi." "He drove to Knoxville the day before my graduation without telling me either," I said. "He was in section 214, left side, third row from the aisle. I was in the hospital when he arrived." "You were in Charlotte." Silence. My mother called an hour later, separate from my father, which told me something about what the kitchen table looked like that Sunday afternoon. She cried for most of the call, and the kind of crying that comes from a place deeper than performance. The crying of a person who has been keeping a particular account balanced in her own favor for a long time and has finally been shown the actual numbers. She said she was sorry. She said she had always loved me. She said the thing that cracked me open and sealed something shut at the same time. The thing I had been waiting for her to say since I was 17 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with a 1,490 SAT score, while Becca got filet mignon at Folks Folly. I told myself you didn't need us the way Becca does. I told myself your independence meant you were fine. But that wasn't you not needing us, Naomi. That was you surviving without us. And I told myself the wrong story for too long. I sat with the phone pressed to my ear, in my apartment in Knoxville, looking out the window at the June light on the Cumberland Avenue sidewalk, and I felt the full specific weight of what it had cost me to be the capable one, the one who had figured it out, the one for whom independence had been a label applied to make subtraction feel like a compliment. I started therapy that fall, 3 weeks into my first year at Vanderbilt Medical School. My therapist was Dr. Carla Hughes, a Victorian-style office on 21st Avenue South, half a mile from campus. Every other Thursday at 5:30 p.m., the only slot I could fit. In our first session, I sat in her blue chair, and she asked what brought me in, and I said, "I collapsed at my graduation, and I think the reason I collapsed was that I had been living like someone who didn't deserve to be taken care of." She looked at me for a moment. "That's a very precise thing to say in a first session," she said. "I'm going to be a doctor," I said. "Precision is what I have." I didn't forgive my parents that year, or the year after. I didn't cut them off entirely either. What happened was more like a renegotiation, slow, imperfect, conducted in small increments over phone calls and holidays, and the careful silences between the things we said and the things we meant. My father came to my medical school graduation in May of 2021. He was on time. He was in the correct seat. He did not miss it. We had dinner afterward at a restaurant on Broadway that my attending Dr. Marcus Webb recommended, and my father ordered bourbon and looked at me in my white coat and said, "I'm proud of you, Naomi." And I said, "I know, Dad," which was the most honest answer I had. My mother and I speak every 2 weeks. She asks about my work carefully, with appropriate distance. She asks about Pop. She asks if I'm eating. I tell her yes, which is true. Sometimes in the pause that follows her asking, I think we're both holding the same calculation. Whether this version of a relationship, These careful phone calls conducted across 300 miles is close enough to what it should have been. Whether close is something to be grateful for. I have decided, for now, that it is. Not because I've finished the work of understanding what happened, but because I've decided that some repair is better than the alternative, and that I get to choose how much of my energy goes into it. Becca and Derek divorced in 2020. She called me in October of that year, from a number I didn't recognize. Keaton, when I answered, she said she just wanted to know how I was. We talked for 20 minutes, careful and a little awkward and nothing addressed directly, which felt appropriate for two women raised in a family that communicated primarily through deflection and redirect. She said she was sorry for some of it. Vaguely, without specifics. But she said it. I told her I heard her. We've talked a few times since. There's something building there. Slowly, in the tentative way of people who share blood and divergent histories, and don't yet know what that combination means for the long run. It is 2026 now, and I am 31 years old, and I am a second-year cardiology fellow at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. I work under Dr. Marcus Webb, who runs one of the best interventional cardiology programs in the country, and who has a habit of asking questions that seem simple until you sit with them. He told me in my first week of fellowship that the best thing a cardiologist can do for her patients is make them feel like someone is genuinely paying attention. I am very good at paying attention. My apartment is on the third floor of a building on Wedgwood Avenue, 12 minutes from the hospital. I have a real couch. I have a kitchen where I cook actual meals. Nothing elaborate, but intentional. A bookshelf organized in a system only I fully understand. Jade Park, who finished her PhD in molecular biology at Vanderbilt in 2023, lives 4 miles away in Hillsborough Village. And we have dinner most Tuesdays at the Thai place on 21st Avenue, where we've been going long enough that the owner brings us spring rolls before we order. Pop is 85, slower than he was. His knee requires more accommodation than before, and he has a home health aide named Marcus, who comes Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But he is sharp. He reads 3 books a month. He argues with the evening news. He checks in with his accountant once a week about the Poplar Avenue property, which has been generating its steady rental income for over 30 years and will almost certainly continue to do so regardless of how closely he monitors it. And every Sunday at 7 o'clock in the evening, my phone rings. I was at my kitchen table last Sunday. Leftover soup? In a journal article on coronary artery calcification spread open beside the bowl, when the screen lit up with his name. I put the article down and answered on the second ring. "Nay, nay," he said. "Hey, Pop. What are you doing?" "Eating soup and pretending to read research." The small laugh that was half commentary on academic medicine and half just him, just the warmth of him. "How was the week?" I told him. The 43-year-old who came in with an ST elevation myocardial infarction, first cardiac event caught early, who cried when we told him he was going to be all right. The specific crying of a person who has just understood how close the margin was. Near the teaching session with the third-year students where one of them asked a question I hadn't expected, and I had to sit with it for the rest of the day before I had a good answer. The pasta Jade had made and pressed on me in a glass container with a sternness that reminded me of nobody so much as Pop himself. He listened. He commented on the things worth commenting on. And then, as he does every Sunday, he said, "I'm proud of you, Nay Nay." "I know," I said. "And I mean it. I have always known, because he has never once let me doubt it." I think about the woman who collapsed in a processional at Thompson Bowling Arena at 22 years old. I think about her hemoglobin at 7.1, and her empty checking account, and the granola bar she ate on the most significant morning of her academic life. I think about the text she read in that dorm room mirror, the engagement party in Charlotte, the decision she made to walk into that arena anyway, especially without them. I think about what she didn't yet know. That her grandfather was already in the Holiday Inn Express on Kingston Pike, bad knee and all, alarm set early enough to be in his seat before the music started. That he would be the one in the chair beside her bed, not because he'd been asked, not because someone had called him to account, but because that was simply the person he was, the kind of person who shows up, who keeps showing up, who does not need to make it a performance or an announcement or a lesson. The will matters less to me now than it once did. The bank statements and the confrontation at the Charlotte kitchen table, those things happened, and they mattered, and there was something important in the fact of them being named. But that's not where the story actually lives. The story lives in the Sunday calls. In the Holiday Inn Express receipt I found in his jacket pocket when I was doing his laundry one Christmas. In the way he sits on the back porch in Germantown and drinks decaf and asks me how I'm eating and actually listens to the answer. I became a cardiologist. I study the organ that keeps people alive, that works without acknowledgement and fails quietly at first, and gives more warning than people recognize if someone is paying the right kind of attention. I do not think that is an accident. My whole life I have been paying attention to what things cost. Not the sticker price, but the interior cost, the toll taken on the body and the spirit by the sustained work of building something from nothing, of being capable in places that needed you to be helpless in order to love you. I learned those costs in a ferritin level of 4 and a hemoglobin of 7.1 and a granola bar eaten standing in a dorm room in a cap and gown. But I also know what it looks like when someone shows up. When someone points their car toward you from 3.5 hours away and books a hotel room and eats Cracker Barrel alone and sets an alarm so they can be in their seat. Section 214, left side, third row from the aisle, before the music starts. When someone puts their hand on the side rail of your hospital bed, just resting it there, just in case. That is what love looks like when it has nothing to prove. If you see yourself somewhere in this story, in the capable one, the independent one, the one whose self-sufficiency was mistaken for not needing, I want you to know that you were always worth showing up for, even when no one did. Especially then, what would you have done? I really do want to know. Leave it in the comments. And if you want more stories like this one, check the description. There's more there for you.